today we are going to finish Edith Finch. We've been playing through this game. It's one of my, not one of, it is my favorite game to teach with in my English language arts class each year. And we've done 2 sessions, so we're going on our third session, and we're gonna play through the end of the game because there's probably only about 45 minutes left, if that much. Yeah, I teach this in my ELA class.
Mom spent months searching for my brother. Then she sealed the doors.
And the purpose of using this game is to analyze the various literary elements, rhetorical devices used throughout the game. And I have my students write analytical, not like a full-on, hey Spook, how's it going? A full-on essay, but it's like 3 paragraphs, because that's kind of what's asked of them on the standardized exam that they need to pass in New York. Choosing one literary element or rhetorical device used in the game and how it connects to the central idea of the game. So, like, for example, a lot of my students chose conflict, and did like a person versus the supernatural, since it's all about this family curse. And they wrote an essay about how that connects to the central theme of death, about how this family believing so much in a family curse that they kind of brought upon their own demise. I should note, so the next
Mom
section we're going...
Edie,
oh, wait 1 second.
I think Lewis blamed himself.
So Lewis, the character Lewis, is Edith's brother. And we're about to play through his vignette, his story of how he died. And before I play this section with my students, I always give a trigger warning beforehand, because this section will deal with suicide. And I know, like, I don't like spoiling games or anything, but you never know who that's going to affect in your classroom. So I always do a short reading. Hermits, how's it going? For anyone who doesn't know, Hermits is one of my previous students who played this game. So Hermits, we're about to play through Lewis's story, which is the one that I don't think you played. I think Lewis played it in our class, but it's the one that deals with suicide. And right before we would actually teach this lesson, I had students read about teen suicide, just to kind of get them in the mindset of what they're going to experience during this vignette.
After he graduated, he just spent more and more time in his room, until Mom got him a job at the cannery.
Although it is my favorite section of the game. I think it's the most creative storytelling-wise. Hermits, how are your college classes? Hermits is no longer my student. He's moved on to college.
Lewis's room smelled very, very familiar. That part of him lived on.
You're having fun there. Good. I'm happy to hear it. You gotta text me more. You haven't texted me in like 5 days.
He was so proud of being Indian. I think for him, it was a way to be something other than just a Finch.
So yeah, so you, Lewis, you're Indian, you're half, so your mom is white, but the father was Indian. My students did enjoy all the psychedelic atmosphere in Lewis's room.
Lewis and I spent a lot of time playing games together, but he was surprisingly bad at them. He died a lot.
It's a fake-looking PlayStation. Unless it's something real, and I just don't know. The Wonderland Turbo. I don't think it's real. I know, we need a long conversation. Alright, we'll talk sometime this weekend. Hey, Space Cowboy, how's it going? So, Space Cowboy, I was just saying, this next section of the game, this next vignette we're about to hop into, is my favorite portion of the game, and was my students' favorite portion of the game. But, as I was saying earlier, I always give a trigger warning beforehand, because this section of the game will deal with suicide. Right, because the entire premise of this game is learning about how each of your family members, or each of Edith's family members, have died in the past. And we are now going to learn about Lewis, who is your brother. So yes, Potter, it is time to get sad again. So Dawn Finch, Dawn is your mom.
Dear Mrs. Finch, as Lewis's psychiatrist, I can understand your desire for an explanation. As I see it, the trouble began in January, shortly after we convinced your son to seek treatment for substance abuse. Newly sober, I believe Lewis first noticed the monotony of his daily life.
So this was his day job at the fish cannery.
But he withdrew part of himself. In our sessions, I saw the same behavior. His mind began to...
And now what's going to be really interesting, so you see this little bubble on the left-hand side of the screen. So it's actually going to make me play 2 different games at the same time. One with the cannery, the fish, and one with this little explorer dude on the left, which is basically Lewis's imagination. So we're going to start getting into like escapism in dealing with the monotony of his work life.
I asked him to describe it.
And it's hard to finagle both at the same time. It tricks your mind.
Imagining a labyrinth.
Hey, Bear Jew, how's it going?
Then something moved. Bats. And toads. And things that have not names. He knew it was all in his head. But he took it very seriously. I had hoped he'd find himself. But he found something more.
Right, and you can see the bubble on the left-hand side of the screen will slowly get bigger and bigger until it, like, encompasses more of your attention.
I worried about him then. Daydreaming at the cannery. I spoke with his boss. But he said Lewis had become a model employee. Methodical, tireless, focused.
Oh, trying to play 2 parts of the game and reading the comments.
Like a whole new Lewis.
Is definitely tough to do.
So I let him go on. I even
so he got a little bigger.
Him. It seemed very promising at first. He told me he'd made a new friend. On the edge of a city he named Lewis Toker. He built the city up slowly, brick by brick.
Hermits, the best lesson... Oh, hey. Oh, I'm not going to know how to say your name. Ortholete. Ortholete. Ortholete, I think. And then Hermits. every time. The best lesson that I learned in my whole life was this part that I guess you talked about it. Hermits, this was the best lesson from all 4 years of being my student, this part of the game. We gotta talk more about that. Ortholete, I was right, okay.
Then he made musicians.
Like athletes, yes.
And songs for them to play. He talked about starting a band. And he was always humming something.
And we'll talk about the part of the lesson that Hermits is talking about right after this section.
Every day his imagination grew stronger. He no longer spoke at the cannery. But his chopping was as reliable as ever. Then one day it struck him that all the cheering crowds Even the stones under his feet were all in his imagination, so he could do whatever he wished. He held an election for mayor, and he won.
It's one of them.
They begged him to stay, but his mind was already wandering. It became a game for him.
You see, got a little bigger.
He'd conquer a city, then immediately push on. New Louisville.
Because his name is Louis.
St. Louis. He started drifting away from our reality. Minneapolis, until one day he forgot to go home from the cannery. Even as his mother pleaded with him, part of Louis kept sailing on.
You were the one playing this. Okay.
In Louisburg, he heard rumors of a...
And I like this little bit of choice that you get. So you're Louis, and you can choose to marry a handsome queen or a beautiful prince. And I also like their choice of adjectives.
Beautiful prince.
They choose beautiful for the prince and handsome for the queen.
The prince was on his own quest for...
Radiant rainbows or sinister serpents? Someone quick. Serpents.
Sinister serpents. He followed the sound of his...
Electric sitar or silver harp? Sitar.
electric sitar. His chase led him to a golden palace east of the sun and west of the moon. Even then, his logic remained sound.
Alright, now you can see it's taking up pretty much the entire screen.
He knew the world was all in his imagination. But he was so proud of having created it. In his own eyes, he'd become something greater than a king. For someone who'd never known success in the real world, I think it was overwhelming. And then it struck him that the real Louis was not the one chopping salmon, but the one climbing the steps of a golden palace. My imagination is as real as my body, he told me. It was hard to argue with him.
And now we get a nice little dose of reality, I think. Right here. So here's your Louis's locker. It's got a Nintendo-looking thing. Some Chinese food.
He began to forget the world we know.
This is the
I think
cannery
it pained him
factory
to
that he works
remember
in.
Lewis, the cannery worker.
I swore he was going to put his hand on that guillotine
He
thing.
began to despise the man with a royal contempt.
Right, and this is Lewis. This is probably the most, like, visceral part. I mean, the way the game deals with death, like, children did die earlier, a baby did die earlier, but I feel like seeing this here is the most, like, visceral part of it that, like, can bring a lot of emotion out. Yep, now we gotta go up.
I still thought I could save
towards
him.
the light.
Even after he said he was being crowned king over all the lands of wonder. The palace would be packed with his companions.
Alright, and you're on this conveyor belt, so you gotta go forward, you can't go back. Notice how I'm also not cutting the salmon anymore. Now it's just the imagination.
Including the wise Calico
Or
who'd
his
insisted on
new
embalming.
reality in his head.
His prince waited, holding his crown. There was only one thing left to do.
And you might know what's gonna happen. So I'm waiting for my
Bend down his
crown.
head.
Right, so it was right around here. My students, they knew that this is not going to end well, right? And you already know that everyone's story is going to end in death. But this is why I give a trigger warning before playing through this section of the game.
The rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
My brother was really cool. I wish you could have met him.
Right, so what Hermits was saying that the lesson from this was, and this was something that I actually learned, it's definitely sad. A couple of years, I think 2 years ago, it was at whenever talking about suicide, I had always used the words commit suicide. Someone committed suicide because that's how I saw it portrayed and discussed in media and on the news. That's how my teachers spoke about it previously. But it wasn't until I was at a Games for Change conference here in New York City, actually, and a lot of you know her, Dr. Kelly Dunlap, gave a presentation here talking about content warnings and trigger warnings in games and when to provide them. And she had mentioned in that presentation that you shouldn't say committed suicide, that instead it should be died by suicide, right? It's not something you knowingly committed, it was something that killed you. So that lesson that I learned, I've gone on to teach to my students, to one of them here, Hermits, that it's not something you're committing, it's something that you are dying by. Yes, Hermits, you are here.
On the way back from Lewis's funeral, my mom told me to start packing. She waited until the day before we left to tell Edie. I'm not sure if she wanted to make it easier or harder.
And Edie is your great-grandma.
I wish we'd stayed.
And it was after Lewis's death that you and your mom left here for good to get away from all of it.
My mom ended up leaving everything behind.
Those are name tags, pictures, happy 90th birthday. Less about unwilling and more about it being portrayed like a sinful crime, committing suicide. Yeah, totally, right? So the idea is that it's not a crime. And the game is super depressing, right? The entire theme of this game is death, right? And how, like, we're all constantly surrounded by it. This family a little more so than others, but yeah.
Maybe it should have come sooner.
It is one of my favorite games ever made, though. Because it also took the walking simulator genre that, like, Gone Home really popularized, and turned it into this whole new thing where, yeah, you still have the walking sim through Edith's eyes years, but then each story is a completely unique vignette. So that story was Lewis's imagination, the world he created on his own, but then we have poems, we have comic books as other vignettes, we have the cameras, the flip book.
Last night.
So this is your room, right? All the way at the top of the crazy house. And this, I believe, is the final vignette. So yeah, this portion of the game is going to be a little bit shorter than the other two previous weeks, but that's fine.
That whole last day, Edie just watched us pack and didn't say a word. Until supper, when she raised her glass and said,
"To our final night together, and all our final nights apart."
Grandma, you know what I said about alcohol. Some of your medications are very
Edith,
specific.
I left a present for you in the hallway. Why don't you go open it? The grown-ups have to argue now.
I'm sorry, you're right. We're all leaving tomorrow. Let's just enjoy our last...
I'm not leaving.
Edith, you're excused.
Right, so now we're flashing back 2 years prior.
the power had been shut off that morning.
Follow the
Edie
candle
always
lights.
had plenty of candles.
Game Design 101.
When my mom sealed the library, I don't think she knew about the other entrance.
There's always
Or
a secret
that
entrance
Edie
in
had
this
a key
house.
to it.
That thing you're afraid of isn't going to end when you leave the house.
Now, as much as I love this game, candles in a library,
Edith has a right
unattended,
to know these stories.
My
seems
children
sketchy.
are dead because of your stories. I think it's best if Edith and I leave tonight.
Right, so the mom blames that because the family believes so much in this curse that they're bringing it upon themselves, which is one of the lessons of the game that they're trying to teach, which a number of my students wrote in essays afterwards.
Okay.
And I should say, I don't know how many teachers here, but like my entire curriculum for this game is available for free on Hey Listen Games. History of the Finches by Edith Finch. So Edie is the great-grandma. Historian, what's going on?
Dear Edith,
Thanks,
there's
Space
so
Cowboy.
many stories I wish I could tell you, but there's only time for one.
You made it for the
This
final
is about
vignette.
what happened on the night you were born. That night, the tide went way, way out.
So now we're playing as Edie, the great-grandma.
It was the first and last time I ever saw the old house aground? There'd been an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean. They called it the lowest tide in 1,000 years.
Right, yeah, so that over there is the original house that sunk. And this is the new house that they built after they got here. We're doing alright, we're just being depressed together playing through this game.
God, it smelled awful. You know, I've seen that house every day of my life.
So, Historian, right before you got here, we played through Lewis's vignette, the one with the fish factory, the cannery.
When the fog rolled in, I lost my way. I got turned around. I started seeing things.
So, I mean, I would like to design an entire class around this game, like 14 Weeks of Edith Finch. That's sort of what I did with... but I did it with Edith Finch and Gone Home together.
Things I'd forgotten.
Which worked out really well. It went phenomenally.
But when I saw them, they felt like old friends. That night, a lot of things came back to me.
Do you pair them in your curriculum online? Yeah, so on the website there's... I have it in two different places. So, like, there's a section for English Language Arts, where I have curriculum for both Edith Finch and Gone Home individually, just, like, on their own, that teachers can take and place into their own curriculum wherever they want. But then there's a section called, like, video game literature, what's it called? Like, my video game literature class or something like that. And in there, it's a full 30-day unit plan, with, like, daily lesson plans and handouts for 30 days long for for Edith Finch and Gone Home, paired together.
Or maybe
that took an entire summer of planning. I'm debating using a part of Senua's Sacrifice in my class this year, but I have to see how it goes. I just played that, and that game gives me the creeps. Especially because I play with headphones on. That game is freaky. It was really good, but I've never been like so on edge playing a game before.
But that I need you to try and...
Edith, what are you doing in here?
It's mine.
Edith!
Mom, you're gonna rip it! Let go! I kicked and screamed, but Mom dragged me to the car. I never saw Great-Grandma Edie again. The next morning, the van came to pick her up, but she was already gone.
So we don't know what happened to
After
Great-Grandma
that, we moved
Edie.
around a lot.
I like this part with my students to ask like how many of them have
We both
actually
tried to make
done
the
this
best of it.
while in a car. I use Senua to describe psychosis to parent groups and college students.
A few years went by.
How age appropriate do you think it is for... Because like I could totally do it with some of my high school students.
My mom didn't like to talk about it.
But I feel like for middle school that might be
But
tough.
she started getting sick a lot. The rest happened pretty quickly.
So now this is
She got better
your
for a
mom
while.
passing away.
And then she didn't.
I would be using
And
for
then I
Viking
was
lore.
alone.
When did all of a sudden Vikings are so like popular and everywhere?
The last Finch left alive. Until I found out about you.
So this was fun having my
I'm
students
still not
guess
sure
what's
what to tell
happening
you about
in
all
this
this.
moment.
If we lived forever, maybe we'd have time to understand things. But as it is, I think the best we can do is try to open
shows,
our eyes.
then there's Senua, then there's God of War, and the new
And
Assassin's Creed.
appreciate how
Vikings everywhere.
strange and brief all of this is.
So can any of you guess where we are right now? My students really
This
enjoyed
journal
this
was
part.
supposed to be for you. But now
It
I
is
hope
the
you'll never
womb.
see it.
Yes.
I just want to meet
Or the
you
cervix. I don't know exactly which part.
and tell you all these stories myself. But I guess if you're reading this now, things didn't work out that way. This is where your story begins. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want you to be sad that I'm gone. I want you to be amazed that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all. Good luck.
And so Edith, the character you played as the whole game, passed away in giving birth to her son. Right, and if you saw, the son had a cast. So, right, and then from here, whenever we finish a game like this, knife directly into my heart. Yeah, it is. I would always do a Socratic discussion afterwards, going over, yep, very, very depressing, Space Cowboy. Discussing the game, and then I gave them I think it was 2 class periods to write an in-class essay, choosing one literary element or rhetorical device. So a lot of them chose conflict. A number of them chose symbolism or theme. Actually, I think a lot of them chose theme. Talking in this essay, they were able to write about either Edith Finch or Gone Home. So a number of them did choose to write about Gone Home. But we actually had a nice little bit of foreshadowing in the first scene of the game. Let's see, are we gonna... Usually when I finish a game, I let the credits roll all the way, but I've now finished this game like 10 times. You could do a class period on these credits alone. Yeah, 100%. Right, I love how it kind of goes through all the different parts of the game and the different symbols for different characters. And then can replay. So now we can replay a story. Oh, that's weird. It's not letting me move my menu's frozen. I guess we're gonna let the credits roll. Because the very first scene of the game, when I was mentioning foreshadowing, you're on a boat, and you're opening that journal that Edith is writing in the entire time. And so it wasn't actually Edith in that first portion of the game, it was actually her son who was there at the end at the gravesite. So they kind of already told you what was happening in the very first scene of the game, but you don't put that together until the last scene. But yeah, I'll put, since we have some time and my menu's frozen, I can throw some links. It does that when I put a link to my site or to the curriculum, it does ask you to make an account. It's not like it is free. But that's up to you whether or not you want to share your email with me. But I'll put a link here. This is to the actual 30-day. That one's the actual 30-day curriculum. So the unit dubbed the Walking Simulator. And then if you want a more just individual Edith Finch, just standalone, not fleshed out over the course of 30 days, I'll put a link to that one as well. And that one is more of like a 3-day lesson, because it'll probably take some class time to get through the game. Yeah, and the second link is the game standing alone. And it was cool, actually, and I had contacted the developers, Giant Sparrow, when I had made it, asking, like, permission, like, is it okay if I make this curriculum and post it on my site and write about it, and they were super thrilled that I was doing it. And they actually provided me with a full script of the game for me to reference when I was making the curriculum, which was really cool. Digital script, not physical. It would be cool if I had a full physical script of the game as kind of like a collector's item. But it was just a download PDF. Let's see if the menu will work. Or it'll just sit on a black screen forever. So what do you all think? What do you think of the game? Space Cowboy, I know it's depressing, but did you at least enjoy it? Did you like it? Is it a good type of depressing? Historian loves this game, I already know that. Berger really enjoyed it, cool. So I think it's good timing because I'm literally trying to go to the menu and the game is frozen on the screen. So this is probably... Spook loves the game, great. So we'll probably just chill here for a minute and talk, because this is where the stream's gonna end. The game's frozen. But I do think, like, when people ask best games of the decade, this is always on my list. Not everyone chooses indie games, they always go for the big AAA games, but this is always on my list for, in contention for best game of the decade. Especially since it took a genre, the walking simulator, and turned it into something so different, and more than it was previously. Yeah, I think we can end here. It's a little shorter than last week, but that's fine. So thank you all for coming. For anyone interested, so this is the Hey Listen Game stream, but, right, this is the Geeks Like Us channel, who I love to hang out with, so, yep, you can see. Thank you for posting the Discord, Potter. Come hang out in the Discord with all of us. All right, it's a good community to talk everything geek related. All right, I'm going to head out, so I will see you all later. I wonder if there is an Ed Nurse podcast or something. I don't know. All right, see you all later.